They stripped her of her name. They tore the pack from her soul. Elara Thorne was a princess of Silvercrest until her father traded her like a piece of livestock. Now, she stands at the edge of the Shadow Ridge, a graveyard for the forgotten. But the mists aren't empty, and the debt is about to be collected in blood. Episode 2. The ritual ground was a circle of jagged obsidian, reflecting the cold, uncaring stars. Elara felt the collective gaze of 1,000 pack members. Wolves she had negotiated for, fed and protected, now staring at her like she was a diseased limb. Without warning, Alpha Fenris released his aura. It was a physical weight, a crushing mountain of alpha command that slammed into Elara's shoulders. "Kneel!" he barked. Her body moved on instinct, her knees cracking against the stone. Deep down, she knew the truth. Her body was still his property until the bond was broken. She looked up, her eyes searching for a flicker of the father who used to carry her on his shoulders. Instead, she found only the cold calculation of a merchant balancing a ledger. "Tonight we settle the Iron Claw debt," Fenris roared to the crowd. "By the blood of the Thorn Line, we buy our safety." He reached out, his hand wrapping around Elara's throat. What followed was a scream that ripped from her soul. Fenris didn't just let go, he tore. It felt like 1,000 jagged hooks were being pulled through her mind, shredding the telepathic tether that connected her to the pack. The hum of the hive mind, the comforting warmth of 1,000 shared heartbeats, was silenced in a single, agonizing instant. As the silence stretched, the world went gray. She was a blank. She was a ghost in a body, disconnected from the earth and the sky. She reached out, her fingers brushing her father's boot, one last silent plea for mercy. Yet, Fenris didn't even look down. He turned his back, and as if pulled by a string, the entire Silvercrest pack turned with him. The Ironclaw guards stepped forward, their laughter sounding like dry bones rattling. The trek to the neutral zone was a blur of dust and the metallic tang of blood in her mouth. Elara's wrists were bound in heavy iron, making her feel like the political pawn she had always been. Alpha Fenris walked ahead, never once looking back at the daughter he had just lobotomized. "Here is your tribute," Fenris said, his voice flat as he met Alpha Silas at the border. Silas, the Ironclaw leader, stepped forward and gripped Elara's jaw. His thumb pressed into a bruise on her cheek, his golden eyes dancing with a cruel, predatory light. "She's a broken thing, Fenris. You took her fire before you gave her to me." "The debt is settled," Fenris replied, his voice already receding as he turned to walk back to his gilded city. Truth be told, Silas didn't want a slave. He leaned in close, his breath smelling of raw meat and rot. "You think you're going to my palace, little princess? No, my men need a hunt. We haven't had a highborn fox to chase in years." Before she could speak, Silas lunged, not to kill, but to terrify. He shoved her backward. Her world tilted as she stumbled over the cliff edge of the ridge boundary. She fell, a silent scream caught in her throat, tumbling through the thick supernatural mists that guarded the wasteland. Just like that, the daughter of the High Alpha was nothing more than prey. Shadow Ridge was not a place of earth and trees. It was a graveyard of volcanic ash and twisted ironwood. Elara woke up with her lungs burning, her silks torn to rags. The supernatural cold of the ridge began to seep into her bones, an icy hunger that demanded her life. She crawled toward a cluster of blackened rocks, her chest aching with every breath. "I need shelter," she whispered. Her voice sounded thin, stripped of the authority she once wielded. Without her pack bond, she felt half blind, unable to sense the predators lurking in the mist. Suddenly, a low, guttural snarl vibrated through the air. A ridge beast, a wolf so corrupted by exile and hunger that its fur had fallen out in clumps, stepped into the pale moonlight. It was a nightmare in skin, its eyes glowing with a mindless, feral rage. Her heart skipped as the beast crouched, ready to spring. She had no claws. She had no alpha. All she had was a jagged piece of obsidian she had grabbed from the dirt. She wasn't a warrior, but she was a survivor. No matter how hard she tried to be brave, her hands shook. The beast lunged. Between one breath and the next, Elara rolled, the beast's claws missing her neck by a fraction of an inch. She didn't think. She acted. She drove the obsidian shard into the creature's leg, not to kill, but to buy time. Soon after, she scrambled into a narrow crevice in the rock, her pulse racing so loudly it was the only thing she could hear. Hours passed in the freezing dark. Elara huddled in her crevice, watching the mist swirl like ghosts. The ridge beast was still out there, its ragged breathing a constant threat. But then a new shadow appeared, a massive, towering silhouette that made the feral beast look like a pup. "Death is a mercy in this place," a voice rumbled. It was deep, like the grinding of tectonic plates. Elara watched as a man stepped into the clearing. He was covered in scars, his eyes a piercing, intelligent blue. This was Kaelen. He didn't shift. He didn't growl. He simply raised a hand and the ridge beast whimpered, backing away as if it had seen a god. "Who are you?" Elara croaked, her voice trembling. Kaelen didn't answer right away. He looked at her torn silks and the blood on her hands, with a clinical, detached focus. "A ghost of Silvercrest," he finally said. "You were the one who negotiated the grain tax last winter. I remember your scent." "Please," she begged, her pride finally shattering. "Help me." "In the ridge, no one is given a life," Kaelen said, his voice cold and final. "You only keep what you can defend." He turned to walk away, his cloak fluttering in the wind like a raven's wing. Elara felt a surge of panic. If he left, she was dead. She didn't know what scared her more, the monsters in the dark or the man who looked at her like she was already a corpse. Still, she dragged herself out of the crevice, her soul answering the challenge in his voice. She would follow him, or she would die trying. The journey through the ridge was a nightmare of steep climbs and jagged ravines. Kaelen never slowed down, forcing Elara to move on raw instinct and desperation. Eventually, the volcanic ash gave way to a hidden valley, carved into the very heart of a dead volcano. This was the outcast settlement. It wasn't a camp of monsters, it was a fortress. Hundreds of wolves moved through the streets, some missing limbs, some scarred by the severing. But they weren't fighting. They were building. They were training. "This is the ridge," Kaelen said, gesturing to the stone halls. "The world thinks we are animals. We let them think that, because it keeps the weak away." Elara's world tilted as she saw a group of pups playing with a ball made of leather. There was no alpha link here, no one was barking orders. They worked together because they chose to. As if fate demanded it, she realized the law of the ridge was something Silvercrest couldn't understand. It was freedom. But then a guard stepped into their path, a massive woman with an eye patch and a spear made of bone. "Kaelen, you brought a silver blood into the forum?" "She isn't silver anymore," Kaelen said, his eyes locking onto Elara's. "She's a blank. Let's see if she has a soul beneath the silk." They brought Elara before a tribunal of 3 elders. They sat on high stone benches in the obsidian forum, their faces etched with the bitterness of their own exiles. "State your value," the lead elder commanded. His voice echoed through the hall, cold and mocking. "And don't tell us who your father is. Names have no weight here." Elara stepped forward, her body aching. I was a diplomat. I know the laws of the 5 packs. I know how to settle disputes without blood." A ripple of laughter went through the room. "We have no packs here," the elder spat. "We have no disputes that a blade cannot settle. You were a pawn, girl, a sacrifice. You are here because your own blood didn't want you." Deep down, she knew the truth. They were right. She had spent her life being a tool for a man who threw her away like trash. The fallacy of loyalty shattered inside her, leaving behind a cold, sharp void. "I am a survivor," she said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous octave. My father betrayed me to buy peace with his enemies. He thinks I'm dead. I want to show him he's wrong." In that moment, the room went silent. Kaelen stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of a blade at his hip. "I claim her," he said, "as a student of the law. If she fails, her blood is on my hands." Kaelen led Elara to a small stone room lit by a single flickering torch. On a pedestal sat a heavy, iron-bound book, The Statutes of the Exiles. "This is the only master you will ever serve," Kaelen said, his voice a low rasp. "Read it, learn it. These are the rules that keep us from becoming the monsters they say we are." Elara reached out, her fingers trembling as she touched the cold iron cover. She felt a shift deep inside her, a spark of something new. It wasn't the pack bond. It was her own will. She realized she could never go back to being the person she was. The silver heir was dead. "Take the vow," Kaelen prompted. "I will never seek a master," Elara whispered, the words feeling like fire in her throat. "I will never be a pawn again. My life is mine to defend." Come morning, they led her to the communal fire in the center of the settlement. Elara stood before the flames, her silver-crest diplomat's cloak in her hands. It was the last piece of her old life, the white silk now stained with ash and blood. Without another word, she tossed it into the fire. She watched the silver threads turn to black, the smoke rising toward the sky, and she let it happen. She wasn't a daughter anymore. She wasn't an heir. She was a student of the Ridge, and for the first time in her life, she was dangerous. The silver heir is dead. In her place stands a woman with blood on her hands and a book of iron in her heart. But as Elara burns her past, a new shadow looms over the Ridge. The Iron Claws are coming for their prize, and they aren't bringing a contract, they're bringing a cage. Watch Episode 3, The Merit of Shadows, to see the High Judge's first hunt.